Hello, I'm Nathan Furr from the Brigham Young University Marriott School of Management. Welcome to the Entrepreneur Lecture Series. Today's guest is Jayson Edwards, founder of J-Dogs, a unique business famous for its tasty Polish and beef hot dogs, as well as its special sauce. Transforming a small shack into a highly popular food stop just south of BYU, Jayson has watched his hard work yield J-Dog's success since its establishment in 2004. He even met his wife Heidi while working at the order window. They are the parents of a 2-year-old daughter named May and reside in Springville, Utah. The BYU Center for Entrepreneurship and Technology welcomes Jayson Edwards to the Entrepreneur Lecture Series. Welcome, Jayson.
Welcome, thank you.
Jayson, one reason I'm really excited to have you here is because even though I've only lived in Provo a short time, I've become a big fan of J-Dogs, and as all my children are. But another reason too, and that is the purpose of this lecture series is not only to share with students here at BYU the kind of fundamental principles of entrepreneurship, but also to share it much more broadly.
Sure.
And as part of that, one of the things that is important to understand is there are many forms of entrepreneurship. Social entrepreneurship, local entrepreneurship, high growth, or sometimes called gazelle entrepreneurship. And these forms of entrepreneurship share some principles, but they also diverge in some important ways. So when I say social entrepreneurship, it's entrepreneurship focused on a very specific social need, and profits may not ever be a goal. It may be just sustaining the organization. Local entrepreneurship, you make a local area much better with the services or products you provide, but right away you need to be generating profit. Whereas high-tech growth, you may invest years and years of time and money with no profits whatsoever, with an end goal of kind of having a national scope. And so, one thing that's really nice is to have you here because you've really focused on a really fun and unique brand of local entrepreneurship, which is, in truth, what most entrepreneurs do. That is the bulk of entrepreneurship. So, as students, as you listen to this, pay attention to those similarities and those differences.
Sure.
But before we dive into that, I want to hear about you. Tell me about yourself. Why did you become an entrepreneur?
Well, I grew up in the Pacific Northwest, Portland, Oregon, and I remember as a small child, my dad coming home from work being really frustrated with his job. Well, he's a firefighter. He's retired now, but he was always frustrated that he came home and the guy sitting next to him that maybe didn't work as hard as he did always got paid. They got paid the same, and that really frustrated him. And I thought about that a lot. I really, didn't have. I didn't dream about opening up a hot dog shack while I was, 8 or 9 or 10. Yeah. But I knew that I really liked the idea of working for myself and, getting an income from what, from my hard efforts and being paid what I think I deserve. Yeah. So
that's great. So, you had a sense where you wanted to do your own thing, and I can relate to that quite a bit. But where did the idea for J-Dogs come from? Were you a student at BYU at the time? Were you, what was happening?
What had happened is after I graduated high school, I went to Rick's College, and I studied there for 3 semesters, and then I went on my mission. And it wasn't until I went on the mission to Toronto was I introduced to the hot dog culture. They had like little street vendors on every corner. It was more kind of a street food scene that, Provo and Rexburg, believe it or not, lacked.
Yeah.
So it's okay to laugh during this too, right? We don't have like the applause sign going off. But so while I was there, I just became acquainted with it, and we ate at the little hot dog carts quite a bit because I worked with the Chinese people. So where we lived to where Chinatown was quite a ways away, and to save time, instead of going home, we just just hang out, and it was only like $2 or $3 Canadian, so that was like, what, 70 cents American back then?
Back then.
So it was cheap. It was really cheap, and ate a lot of hot dogs.
Yeah.
Yeah, started my mission at like 180 pounds.
Wow.
And that's a joke, guys. It's okay. Lighten up. So that's right. But I wasn't like formulating any business plans or during the interviews with my mission president, picking his brain about starting businesses. I just became accustomed or acquainted with the culture.
Yeah. It's interesting because I think a lot of good business ideas come by taking an idea from one spot, moving it to another. So,
Sure.
like what you did is you saw like a geography, and so hey, there's this hot dog culture,
Right.
and it's not in these other places, and that's actually the same way that Starbucks got started.
Yeah.
Was the founder Howard saw this Italian coffee culture and said, gee, people drink coffee in the United States, but it's not here. And so there's kind of that geographic movement.
Right.
And there's also, like, for example, an industry movement. Some companies are founded because they say, hey, this cool technology is used in running. Why don't we apply that to, X, Y, or Z? So that's an interesting that you had that experience. So it just kind of, you were there. But you came back to the States, and why hot dogs?
I don't know, why not? I was an Asian, because I spoke Chinese, I decided to get out of college as fast as possible. Because I'm not, I liked school, but I wasn't wanted to become like a future student or a career student. So I chose Asian studies, and pretty much the only opportunities that opens up is if you wanted to be like a spy. So could you imagine me being like undercover Buddha or something?
Yeah, I could.
It's not happening. Or like working for, translator, or working for, foreign companies. So I really had no idea what I was going to do with my life until I took a class out of the Marriott School. It's called Business Entrepreneur Skills for Non-Business Majors. And it was taught by Steve Gibson. I think they still teach it here. I don't know what number it is, but you can look it up. And there's this guy, he just walks into class, and he's like, yeah, I've sold my business for millions of dollars. And he just looks like the guy next door, and he drove like a late model American car, like an Oldsmobile. And I think he still drives. He's like very down to earth, very approachable. I'm like, hey, that could be me. I didn't have any like prospects. I didn't have really a job or a girlfriend or anything. I was pretty much like a loser, And so I really had no idea what I was going to do with my life. Add to the fact that I'm a middle child, and then that just complicates things too, because you always feel like you have to like fit in with your older brothers that already have jobs and know what they're going to do, and and so every time your parents call, they're like, so what are you doing with your life? I'm like, well, I don't know. I was just kind of like fart in the wind, I was just kind of just doing my thing, and I really didn't have anything going on.
Yeah.
So there's like the beat button back there from Girls Like. So.
No, that's good. One of the surprising things is when you hang out with a lot of entrepreneurs, it kind of demystifies it a little bit. You kind of think, oh, entrepreneurs who've been successful, they're like these geniuses. They had these big ideas and these kind of unbelievable skill set I'll never acquire. And
Right.
actually, it's that they just went and did something.
Right.
And then they executed on that.
That was the key. When I was walking to school one day, going to class, I came across the shack, but it kind of looked like it was really dilapidated. It kind of looked like a meth lab had been in there, a crack house or something. It was in really bad shape. The windows were busted out, little Hare Krishna posters all over the windows, and I looked inside, and it was in really bad shape. But I was like, man, that would be an awesome place for a hot dog stand. Because originally I wanted to do a cart, but when I went and talked with the city and the county health department, they're like, have you ever seen a hot dog cart around here before? And I was like, wow, I think, and I was thinking I was like pretty smart. And he's like, well, we don't allow them. And so that was like my first real roadblock.
Yeah.
And so I kind of put it on the back burner and just went about, with school and that, and then walked by the shack. And I never really noticed it before, but it was there, and I called up the landlord, and that's how I came about the location.
Wow.
So I just kind of had to take, I was so focused on the cart aspect that I didn't really think about maybe doing it in the storefront.
Yeah.
And that's how I came across the shack there.
That's great. That storefront's an interesting location, and we should talk about it some more. But what do you see as it's if you haven't seen it, it's a very, very small shack. It's basically like 8 feet by 4 feet kind of thing.
Well, maybe
Is
a
that too
bit
big?
bigger.
Yeah, okay.
Maybe a bit bigger, but it's definitely like, it's what do they say? It's a 3-butt kitchen. When I'm in there, it's a 2. So it's really, really cramped.
Yeah.
And so thinking of having to work out of that, some people would be like, how do you do it? But we just had to become very creative in the way that we work, and just be very efficient in serving that amount of people every day.
Yeah.
But what I did, when I first found that location, I would sit on the curb and I would count the students that would come down off the hill.
Yeah.
And it's about, on the hour,
Yeah.
there'd be hundreds of students just pouring off that hill.
Yeah.
So you put yourself in a good location. I mean, it's not like the end-all, be-all. You have to have a great location, but it really helps when you have that kind of free exposure.
Yeah. And my guess is, so you had free exposure in terms of high traffic.
Right.
I mean, I know nothing about your finances, but my guess is that you're probably able to get a decent, lease from a guy who's got an empty shack, basically.
Right. Yeah.
And so you kept your fixed costs relatively low.
Sure.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Now, if you go to J-Dogs, you'll notice there's basically two things on the menu. Why two things? Why not more? I mean, you could offer a lot more. Why did you decide to offer two kinds of hot dogs?
Well, I initially kind of adopted the In-N-Out burger model. Just keep it really simple and focus on a few things. If you think about your favorite restaurant that you like to go to, you open up the menu and there's just tons of different stuff. But the restaurant really excels at a few things, and the rest of the stuff is kind of filler. And you ask the waiter, how about this? He's like, oh no, that's not very good. Yeah. You go to Carrabba's or whatever, you get the same thing every time. And I just really wanted to focus on that. And two, we just don't have the storage space to keep a lot of things, and it's very simple for the employees. And if you get somebody coming up to the window and it's 30 or 40 people deep, they're like, well, let me try. How's the Southwest bacon wrapped, chipotle sauce, it's just kind of weird.
Yeah.
And so I just, Polish or beef, just really simple and makes life easy.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. And actually, there's some good research on that shows that simplicity can be better.
Yeah.
And people have obviously responded to that. As you kind of walk through the timeline of, so you mentioned this, you had an idea around the hot dog culture, you thought about doing a cart, you went to the city, hit a roadblock. Yeah. Went past the shack, hey, this might work. What are kind of the highs and lows of developing J-Dogs into, kind of a successful business? Okay. Did it just blow? First day, everything was great, or what did you have to go through, and what challenges did you face? Well,
definitely the first low that I can think of is that phone call to the parents telling them that you're going to drop out of school to start a hot dog shack. Oh, yeah. Or your dad's like, what are you doing? I'm like, oh, I'm going to start a hot dog shack, you know? Yeah. And it wasn't the most pleasant phone conversation. Yeah. Because, who really doesn't like the support of their family and friends? It's pretty lonely. But sometimes that's how it has to be when you have an idea and you've done your market research and in your heart that it'll be a good thing. Yeah. Some people don't see it that way. And eventually they'll come around. He's my biggest supporter now. Yeah. But it takes some convincing of people, and honestly, who really cares what other people think when you have done your research and what it's going to take, and you're willing to commit the hard work to get something off the ground. Yeah. The highs and lows. So when I wanted to start it up, it had a lot of work to be done. Yeah. And so I went to the city and I wanted to get the power turned on, so I could start renovating the shack. Yeah. And they were like, well, we can't really turn the power on until you have a business license, but the city wouldn't give me a business license until I fixed the floor. So you can kind of see how bureaucracies work a little bit. Yeah. You just kind of go round and around and around. So you have to get kind of creative. So what I did is I borrowed a generator from a friend. Keep in mind, I didn't really have a car at this time. So when I was going to get supplies and lumber and all that, I would take it on the UTA. So I'd go to Home Depot and go all the way down to Home Depot, get my stuff, get on the bus, come back. If I could borrow a truck or whatever from a friend, I would. Yeah. And that's how I tracked down the generator. A friend of mine had a father-in-law that had a generator. And so I would do that until I'd go to class until about 3 or 4, go to work. I cut lawns at the MTC, work there a few hours every day, and then work at J-Dogs the rest of the time and work late until the night. I remember one time I was working there, and they had, in the shack, they had kind of like this light bulb, like the fish tank clip-on type. Yeah. And I don't know whether the generator was putting out too much juice or whatever, but I kept blowing out light bulbs. And I was like halfway in the middle of a project, and I was running out of light bulbs. And so I went over to Campus Plaza and I just started tracting door to door, knocking on doors, asking people for light bulbs.
Yeah.
Because I didn't want to stop working, and I wanted to get the job done, and it was really, it was rather kind of embarrassing.
Yeah.
But sometimes you have to do things like that to get stuff done.
Yeah. You know, what I love about that is, I just want to highlight two things about kind of your lows is, well, first, on what, I mean, that's a great story, carrying the supplies in the UTA. And it highlights characteristics most successful entrepreneurs have, and that is they're scrappy. In other words, they may not have all the resources, they may not have all the money, they borrow stuff, they beg stuff, they ride the bus with lumber, and they do what it takes to get it done. And I think sometimes if you're waiting for kind of all the pieces to align first, waiting for the money to line up and the right people and all that, you'll never get there. Because it won't line up until you kind of make the effort.
Yeah.
The other thing you said is this challenge of sometimes when you jump off into entrepreneurship, it's challenging because especially maybe if you come from back east, it's like, well, you're going to be a doctor or a lawyer. Like, what is this other thing?
Sure.
And even if you come from the West Coast, like you're going to open a hot dog stand. Like, come on.
Sure.
But you said something interesting. You said you'd done your research and you were convinced. Tell me, what did you do and what led to that conviction?
Well, what I did is initially, as I said before, I would count the students coming off the hill, and then I would I talked to all the food distributors. Well, I tasted all of the hot dogs in like a 10-mile radius from the Sinclair station to the Cougar dog or whatever, and I was like, well, I could do something better than this that I was more accustomed to back east. And so I called up all of the food vendors, and they really didn't want to initially deal with me because, you have to get an initial order of like, $1,000 for them to even bring it down on a truck to you. And they're like, yeah, I'm just like this little hot dog shack, and I'm going to sell hot dogs. Well, how long have you been? Well, I'm not even open yet. And, who's going to give that guy the time of day? But I called the people, and they'd bring all these samples, and then I'd have taste test parties. So I'd get like older people, my young friends, BYU employees, the guys at the machine shop came down, and we just kind of had taste testing and figured out what was going to be the best for us, for me. And then that's kind of how I developed the, where we got the food and all that.
That's interesting because it also kind of dispels a little bit of another myth, which is it wasn't just that you believed you wanted to do this. I mean, you actually did a remarkable amount of research for starting one hot dog stand south of campus. You were counting people, you were researching your competitors, you were looking into your suppliers and figuring that out. And then the best part, though, is you were testing with your customers. And that was great.
I'm sure it has like a real fancy business name.
There's fancy names for that.
I did it all. On a very simple level.
Isn't that great? That's perfect. Awesome. That's awesome.
No, I did some research on hot dogs, and it's a really, it's a big business. You just don't think, because you can get caught in that trap where you're like, hot dogs, why? You hang around. You guys have been in the Tanner building before, for the business. The business students in there are pretty serious guys, if you've noticed, guys and gals. They like the dress up, the laptops, the Excel spreadsheets, and that's life. So if you say, hey, I'm not like that, that doesn't mean that you can't be an entrepreneur, because that's definitely not like my mentality and my temperament. But it's a lot different. You need those guys to succeed, but you definitely don't have to be like that in order to be successful.
And you got to be yourself. It comes down to it. So, so two lows. What were kind of some of the highs? I mean, for example, what did the first few months at J-Dogs look like? I mean, I could imagine there being a little stressful.
Long hours. I really didn't know what I was doing. I remember when the first customer came up to the window, I was like flustered. I was like, and I really didn't know what to do. I was making change out of my apron. Well, I didn't even have the money really I didn't even think that far ahead to get money for change. So I had to call up my folks and say, hey, can you send me like $70? Can you transfer it into an account? Well, backing up a bit, just the funding of it alone is kind of a funny story.
How did you do that?
As I said, I didn't have any money, but I had a sweet Fender Telecaster that I really, really liked. So I pawned that to my dad, and that's how I got the money.
That's great.
So it's called bootstrapping. That's what they call it. And that's what I did. but I didn't think that far ahead to even get money to make change. And so I was kind of like flustering, and it was probably a nightmare. Probably the first few years was just, if I could have like a tape and watch like reality J-Dogs right now, I'd probably be shaking my head the whole time, because I really didn't know what I was doing. But I think that's half the fun and half the creativity, is just learning as you go and not having these preconceived notions of what to do. You know, people telling you, and just you might find more creative ways to solve problems. Yeah.
Did it take off like right away? Like, how long did it take to? I mean, how long were you kind of like wondering, are people going to stop by? Are they going to, you know, is this a going venture?
Well, I kind of created a buzz before I started. With a little bit of free advertising.
Yes. Let's talk about that. Advertising.
When I signed a deal, when I decided to go with Pepsi, because they supplied apple beer, and I really thought that was a good combination. Yeah. So I went with Pepsi, and they printed me up a banner, and my buddy's fiance at the time thought of a clever name to print it, and it just said "Wanna Wiener" with a question mark. And that's all I had. See, people's eyes just got really big. Yeah. They're like, did he just say that on TV? But that's what it said. Yeah. And people would drive by and just give it funny looks. Yeah. And it was nothing like weird for me. It wasn't anything like, I don't know. That's just what they call them on the East Coast. Yeah. And so I just brought it in, but I think it created kind of like a Freudian response in BYU students, where you saw the word and then the combination of apple beer, and then like it just kind of went nuts. So people knew about it before I opened. Yeah. And so the first day I had, I think, like 60, 70 customers. Oh wow, that's great. But spanned over like 12-hour day. Oh. So so he's like, oh no, that's done. That was awful. Yeah, you break it down, it was like 15 cents an hour I was working for through the summer.
So how did you kind of create more buzz from there? What did you do for advertising? What did you do to build the business?
Well, I've never done any really formal advertising. We've, you know, as we built off kind of the coffers a little bit, we're able to do some advertising with local high schools, but that's just more been support as it. I didn't really think it was I wasn't planning on it. Yeah. So what I did is just I've really focused on the quality of the product. Okay. And that creates like raving customers. Like word of mouth advertising is the best advertising you can ever have, and it's the cheapest form too. So you just make a killer product, really good customer service, and people will come back, and a great value. You know, Utah in general, they're really big on getting a lot for nothing, and so I had to kind of get used to that a little bit. Yeah. But J-Dogs, I've really like to keep the price down and be a very fair meal for tax included. The dog and the drink is $4 that's with tax. So if you go into like anywhere up on on campus or anything, or Hoagie Yogi, I mean it's like $6-7 for a sandwich or a bowl of rice with some chicken. Yeah. You know, so I want to do something a little bit different and differentiate myself.
That's great. So you kept the value really high. How much was a hot dog just starting out? Was it $1.50, $2, $2.50?
I think it was $2.
$2. So
I don't remember.
$2. It's a good value. You kept the quality really high, and you were in a great location. You leveraged free advertising. That's one challenge actually. Is how do you get the word out? How do you create buzz? And sometimes, if you put a lot of money into some traditional channels, you might just be throwing it away.
A lot of people approached me and wanted me before I even opened to advertise at the movie theaters or on like the side of buses. Very, very expensive, and I don't know how effective it is. If you see stuff on a bus, you're not immediately going to, go there. It might like trigger something, but the word of mouth, it was awesome. It just is exponential. It just,
wow, that's
awesome.
So how many months was it until like break even, where you recouped your initial investment and you started to say this was worth it? Really? 6 days?
Yeah, it was like $800 or $900 that I put in it. Yeah. So it wasn't like.
So it was fast.
Yeah.
So right away you knew this was a success. Yeah. Wow. I would say that's unusual.
Atypical.
Atypical.
Very atypical.
Often
it's like those diet things where someone's real skinny and then on the bottom it says. That's how it kind of felt. Yeah. So, a little bit.
That's great. Yeah. Well, congratulations. I would highlight that many times it takes several months to kind of get things going.
Sometimes.
Years, yeah, it can.
In the food industry, it should be months, because if it's years, then you're in trouble.
Then you're in trouble. That's great. It's interesting because that location, has a long history. In many ways, Yeah, there's been a lot of restaurants that have been in and out. What do you have any secrets about what made that one successful versus, you know, some of the prior businesses that kind of flipped through? I mean, it's kind of sometimes there's these cursed locations, you know, businesses that just can never seem to hold on, and yours is obviously taken on, held on, will hold on. Do you have any thoughts on that? Like, what makes, you know, how do you overcome that?
Well, I think you don't want to initially put yourself in a position where you're going to be staying up at night, like sick to your stomach, that if you don't have X amount of customers there this week, then you're going to have to mortgage your house, and it gets your wife upset, and it just causes problems.
Yeah.
You know how it is.
Yeah.
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 And,
so, but you know, you had such a low, I mean, you had such a low cost threshold. I mean, in a way, like, you know, the rent can't be that much on it. You're selling, you know, your variable costs, that's where most of your costs are, so that was good.
Yeah, so I really didn't, like, think about that a ton. I was just taking the money home, putting it in a jar, and literally it went in the underwear drawer, top shelf. And I really didn't, like, I wasn't going out and buying things. I was very, very, very conservative. And I remember when I was counting through the money the first month and I had enough to pay rent for the second month, I was stoked.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was very, very simple. It was very, very conservative.
Yeah.
And just kind of gone from there.
Good. In more technical terms, we call that keeping your burn rate low.
Sure.
And you did a great job of that.
I knew that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
We're just keeping it simple.
Yeah.
Like J-Dog.
Yeah.
But that's a great formula.
I bought a lot of used things as well and had things donated. You don't have to go out and buy everything brand new. There's a lot of value in buying used. When I was working at the MTC, they were remodeling the kitchen, the cafeteria, and they pulled out all of their stainless steel work surfaces and food serving area stuff, and they had it stockpiled in the back. And I went to BYU. I'm like, how much? What do you guys want for this stuff?
Yeah.
Because the stainless steel was awesome, and they're like $50. And so the guys at the machine shop, they helped me out. We brought the forklift, put it on a flatbed, we cut it with the plasma torch, and put it in there. And it was like, it saved me literally thousands of dollars that I did not have.
Yeah.
And then I had the cash register was donated from Cougar Copy. The guy at Cougar Copy, Eric, donated the cash register, and I was on my way.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. So as you kind of reflect on your experiences, what are some of the lessons learned? What would you share to students who are thinking about entrepreneurship?
The first one is I would definitely look into your, look inside and be honest with yourself and true to yourself, and really try to visualize and put down on paper what you're good at. You know, when you take those personality tests and they say, you know, are you this person? Are you this? And you kind of are like, huh, I'm that guy, but you know you're really not, but you're like lying anyway so that things sound better. You know what I mean? Don't do that. Like, you definitely need to know your strength and your weaknesses are, and, you know, you can always find people that can, you know, pick up the slack on your weaknesses and pair up with people that are good at things that you're not good at. And the second is do what you're interested in. Find something that you're passionate about and figure out a way to make a living, to make money doing it. I've been fortunate to do that up to this point, but who's to say that, you know, I'm going to do this until I'm old? I don't really want to be like the Dave Thomas of J-Dogs.
Yeah.
But a good friend, Greg Peterson, shared with me and is a real big believer in going into the industry that you might be interested in and working in it for a while. If you don't have like any entrepreneurial ideas right now, does that make you a bad person or a bad entrepreneur? No, not one bit. Yeah. Like when I was going through the cellar, my wife makes me clean out stuff, and I found a notebook that I had all these ideas in, and J-Dogs was literally like 7 or 8 down on the list. I had all these kind of harebrained ideas, and I would always write them down. And so if you're interested in something, if you're a tech guy, go to work for Novell, and then, you know, see if there's a pain that you can alleviate for Novell. Sometimes you get great inspiration just being in the workforce. And I mean, I happened to come across that on the mission, which is atypical as well. But I mean, that's just how it happens.
Yeah, that's great. That's a good point. You know, can be really good to get some experience working for an established business. Working with another entrepreneur can be another wonderful way to really learn the ropes. And as you get into an industry or you get into something, that's when you start to see the real pain points.
And you can't really be afraid to get your hands dirty. You got to be willing to put in the work and the sweat equity into your business. Because I mean, I think today that the world kind of sends the wrong message when we think about business. We think about success. The first thing that we usually think about is money. And then you think about what kind of house does that guy live in? What kind of car does that guy drive? What kind of diamond ring did he buy that guy, did he buy his wife? And literally, it's not like that. If you're like chasing after money, you're going to be a lonely and unhappy person in the long run. You really have to do something that makes you feel good, that you get excited to get out of bed to do. And I don't look at that. I sell hot dogs. I like to think that I make people happy for a living, that I sell experience and I get paid for it.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, it's a good point actually, and broadly shared by wise people in the field of entrepreneurship. One book I might recommend is Randy Commissar, who's at Kleiner Perkins, wrote a book called The Monk and the Riddle, and basically he talks about the same idea. During the dot-com boom, having a guy come to him and talk to him about funerals.com and how it's going to make tons of money. And really kind of getting down to the root of what are you after? And if you're after money, you're probably not going to actually end up being successful. You have to find something you care about. And I mean, obviously, you have to haul the stuff on the bus and kind of keep going and kind of stick with your vision.
Yeah.
So I think that's a great point. One thing really quick I wanted to come back to is this question again of social entrepreneurship, local entrepreneurship, high-tech entrepreneurship, high growth. Are there any differences you see or similarities you see that are important? Maybe none. That's fine if you think,
Yeah. Well, the high-tech thing really wasn't my bag.
Yeah.
Like I'm a total Mac guy, and there's a reason why I use that, because I have no idea what's going on inside. I just like to get things done. And so more of the local was kind of my bag. And now the focus is kind of switching into social. We've been able to do like a lot of really good things for local charities and stuff, and just help out because it's such a visual and such a well-known business that it's very, very gratifying. And you can kind of marry the two. I think you can do a lot of really good things, just simple things like food drives or clothes drives, or working with the Boy Scouts, gift certificates for the Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts. We sell cookies. The Girl Scouts come and sell cookies, and they are hardcore, and they are shrewd businesswomen. And so, I mean, it's pretty funny, but we've been able to do a lot with the community, and it's been very mutually beneficial.
That's great. That's wonderful. And one thing I think that your description of launching J-Dogs highlighted for me that I just want to emphasize again is how you really got on the ground and did the market research. And I think, especially in a local environment, you've got to understand that environment. You've got to understand who your competitors might be. You've got to understand what the potential customer throughput is, and really kind of get that value proposition right. And you did that. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Jayson. That kind of is the summary of my questions for you, but I know that some of the students here have some questions.
Sure.
So what questions do you have?
Yeah.
You're probably new to handling food. How was your business? How did you have to be in regulation with food handling, and what steps did you take to make sure? What was that like? Yeah,
you just have to get all of with the food and with the city and with everything. You have to get all of your ducks in a row. And I mean, if you leave something out, then I mean they take no pity on you. And I would just suggest that too, is like, just because you're a student and starting out doesn't mean you have to follow the rules. Like, you got to make sure that you're crossing all your T's and dotting all your I's. So we just, we're in compliance with everything, and we just had to do that, even though we're a very, very compact kitchen. That it's just kind of the same rules that apply for us as would, chef's table,
That's great.
He eats at J-Dogs, by the way. The chef.
Okay.
It's pretty sweet.
Yeah, that is.
Yeah.
I don't blame him.
Yeah.
As you became more successful, what happened when your lease agreement came up for renewal? Did you have challenges with that?
A little bit. The landlord's been really cool. His son actually lives here. He lives in Arizona, and his son lives here, and he kind of watches over things. And so it doesn't get out of control, but you do have to as soon as it was like in BYU magazine and people start hearing about it, the space itself, like people would come up and give me your landlord's phone number, and I'm like, why? And they're like, well, I want to call him and sublease this place. And I'm like, they just kind of get like these crazy ideas, and I'm like, well, you know, would you feel comfortable having someone else live in your room while you're away at school, and then you guys like shared? So it was, get back to the original point. I got off on my soapbox for a second, but no, it hasn't been too bad. You kind of follow the curve of, it's like 5% a year every time for.
Yeah, like a 5% increase.
Yeah,
yeah,
I was looking for that word of, you know what I mean,
Yeah.
Inflation.
Inflation adjustment.
I'm telling you guys, you don't have to be a brainiac to start a business.
Would you consider options for expanding J-Dogs into different locations?
Yeah, we've looked at a lot of different locations. What I've really tried to do these last few years is really kind of get the business down to a science. When I first started, it was just kind of like chicken with my head cut off. And now I've hired a full-time manager, and he's kind of the director of operations. He takes care of everything, and it's freed up a lot of my time to go out and look at other locations and to look at like really exciting projects that people kind of have in the works at different universities. And so things look, some really good things with UVU and with University of Utah, which is, it's such a great demographic, the college scene. You know, there's a lot of like, we went and looked up at property a few weeks ago up at the Meadows. This is really, really expensive, and it just kind of has a very polished, high-end feel, and it's a great place, and they have a lot of awesome stores in there, but it's not really me. And so I kind of like more of the authentic, homegrown feel that's still like profitable and still a very viable business when compared to others, but it just kind of has that feel that people feel comfortable being there, and anybody from any walk of life can come and get a dog, you know? So, but yes, I'm interested in that, slowly, surely.
So when you did word of mouth advertising, you said that you put up this flyer. Did you put up the flyer initially, or did you just start handing out, like, just started talking to your college buddies? I mean, how did that word of mouth function?
Yeah, everybody kind of like in my ward knew, and I just talked to everybody about it. And it was actually like a banner. It was like 4 feet by 8 feet and neon. So those words really like popped out. And so that's how I never like passed out any or flyers or knocked on any doors. It was just kind of word of mouth. And then for the last like 5 years, I've been known as the hot dog guy. Anywhere I go, it's the hot dog guy. You go to the temple, it's the hot dog guy. No, it's the funniest thing. You're like, they're like, J-Dog, what's up? And it's like, you know. But I've kind of like come to the conclusion that that's who I am, and whatever.
For now.
For now.
Yeah.
Whatever. It's fun.
Yeah.
You get some fun perks sometimes.
Yeah.
So.
That's great.
Yeah.
What have you seen in terms of competition or imitators, and how have you dealt with them?
That's a good question. There's always going to be competition, whether it's other restaurants, whether it's the economy, just the competition of people wanting to save $1 and make their own lunch. Just keeping the price low. I think most people can always come up with $3 when they're really hungry for the most part. But imitators, we've dealt with that a lot here at this school and around the valley. And what I've done is I've trademarked the name of J-Dogs, and I also have what they call a configuration trademark, where I'm the only one that can cut the dogs in that pattern. And it's very similar to like the square patty at Wendy's. It's like people look at that and they're like, Wendy's, and that's just what I've done. But you always have to deal with those people. There's kind of a mentality where everybody kind of wants to take somebody else's work and kind of profit off of it. And I would stress to you or to anybody here when you're going to start your business to be innovative and do something that's uniquely you and put your heart and soul into it. It's kind of a gross feeling when you see people take your stuff, but that's just kind of the way the world turns. But people know. I like to call those people stray dogs, not J-Dogs, but stray dogs.
That's great.
Yeah.
How did you even figure out the format, excuse me, the format trademark piece, you know, the crisscrossing? Now, how do you figure out that you could do that?
Well, that was the, after I got in touch with a really good law firm, the Bateman IP Group. And just talking to that guy after, you know, something happened, and keeping names withheld to protect the
Yes.
innocent
Yeah.
or the guilty in
Yeah.
this case. But I talked with him, and he's like, hey, there's some things that we can do. And you really have to protect yourself. And I was really naive about it. So when you first start, if you're going to do something like that, make sure that you know, have access to a good lawyer, a good accountant, good bookkeeper, just from the get-go, because it saves you a lot of heartache.
Yeah.
But
That's great.
it's not, you know, it's not a fun thing to deal with per se, but you kind of have to, because I mean, you gotta, like, it's like if you took your family to the movie and somebody like assaulted your child or something, and you're not gonna say, hey, you know, you're gonna go after them and beat them down, and that's kind of what you have to do. And not trying to be like the big bad business guy, but it's important to protect your stuff.
Yeah. Other questions? Sorry.
In the back.
You have really awesome special sauce.
Yeah.
How did you figure that out? Where'd you get that? Is that a
That is
recipe?
not mine. That was my sweet grandmother's. And it was passed down to her, to my mom, and then it kind of like skipped gender to me. And so, like, my mom, you guys ever had those little smokies that are like simmering in barbecue sauce in the crock pot? Like, that's where I got the idea. And it was something that I'd always had growing up, the sauce, but we never put it on a hot dog. It's kind of weird. But it was just a good marriage, and that's where I got the ideas from Marcella.
That's cool. That's great.
Was there any one event or idea that pushed you from idea to actually launching a business?
Yeah. I was talking to my dad about it, and he told me that I'd never finished anything in my life, and it just really ticked me off, and that was the motivator. I sound like my dad is like a bad guy. He's not, but we sometimes just don't see eye to eye sometimes. But I was just motivated by the fact that he told me that I couldn't do something or didn't ever finish, and that was the motivator.
That's great.
Sad as that is, that's what got me going.
No, that's great. Let's take one more question.
I was just wondering about how many customers you get a day now.
Hundreds.
Hundreds. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not to go into like any specifics, but lots.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great.
Really busy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. Thank you very much, Jayson. Just to summarize some of the topics we've covered, first we talked about finding things that you really care about, that you're interested, rather than just going after making money. Second, we talked about the importance of doing the on-the-ground research about what you're going to do. Third, we talked about being scrappy and pursuing that. You know, in this case, my favorite image is you riding the bus. I think that's beautiful and exactly the way entrepreneurship should be done. And then lastly, we talked about just kind of overcoming some of those hurdles, you know, that you face, and you know, next stage as you roll it out. You've obviously, you know, you've realized the benefit of some of the professional services of accountants and lawyers and so forth, and now you have a manager that allows you to kind of go and do some new things. So a wonderful experience. Thank you for sharing it. Thank you
You're welcome.
for coming.
Thanks for having me. So.